So first question, for those who are maybe unaware or unsure about your background, why don't you give me a little bit of an insight into your background and what you do now?
Yeah, so right now, I'd be Rob's coach, and I also am his manager. And then I have a bunch of guys I manage, and I coach the cartel, him and Rob. I mean, sorry, him and Calvin Kattar. I used to be a fighter myself, and I used to be a teammate of Rob, and then slowly more, moved into the role of being his manager and then his coach. And that's kind of how we got to where we are after 11 years of training together.
Yeah. And how many fighters are you the head coach for? Is it just the two guys, or is there more?
Yeah, just those two, Rob and Calvin. We keep a small group. We're kind of doing it boxing style where, I focus just on running their camps and helping with the other coaches. And I know you had Jake on here, so guys
Yeah.
like Jake and Dupree and Farley, and those guys, we all come together on those two. But those are the only two guys that I focus on coaching. There's a lot of other guys that I manage that I might help coach or help corner, stuff like that. But my primary focus as far as coaching is Rob and Calvin.
And this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Do you think it's beneficial? And I know that you manage a manager to some of the other guys, but for Rob and Calvin being their head coach and their manager, do you think it's beneficial kind of being a linear point of contact for everything fight wise?
Yeah, I think it's good when it's good, and it's bad when it's bad. I think if you have, there's a lot of coaches that try to be the manager, but I don't think they necessarily are competent. And there's a lot of managers that also try to coach, which is usually kind of even worse. Both take a certain skill set. I think, I'm not trying to sound like cocky or anything, but besides Rob and Calvin, there's a bunch of other guys I manage, and that a few of those are in the UFC, and they seem to do pretty well with their contracts, get good fights, and we're managing their career right. So I'm blessed to have that skill. But then obviously, if you look at Rob and Calvin, me as their coach, they're doing really well in their careers. So they're both doing well on the money side. They're both doing well on the technical side. So I think we figured something out here, but I don't think it's necessarily something that can be duplicated as a standard in the industry, just because a lot of coaches, they either don't want to manage, or they don't really have the understanding, or they don't want to put the time in. And there's a lot of managers that just don't have the skill set to be a proper coach. So I think we're in a unique situation, and for Rob and Calvin, it really does work. There's one point of contact. We kind of make all the business decisions at the same time we're making the strategic decisions on the mat, and everything's kind of going hand in hand. And it's just one less person to have to worry about trusting or not trusting. And I think there's a lot of synergy in it.
Yeah. And how long have you been their head coach?
So I've always been Rob's coach. Like the first time he was on the mats in MMA, I was there and I did rounds with him. And at that point I was a teammate. And then it was like 6 months later, I got him an amateur fight, and I cornered him for that. So I've always been Rob's coach. Never had the label as head coach or anything like that until 3 years ago when we made a change, and me, him, and Calvin kind of went off on our own and decided to kind of try this experiment with the cartel of kind of taking more of a boxing approach and building camps around fighters instead of fighters around camps.
Yeah.
And that was for about just really 3.5 years ago. And right before he had the Pedro Munoz fight, and right before Calvin had the Shane Burgos fight.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, you're in Las Vegas now for Rob's fight on Saturday. Talk to me a little bit about, once a fight gets booked, the process involved in terms of getting a fighter prepared.
Yeah, I mean, it's all hands on deck at that point. I always say this: Rob and Calvin, if most fighters are at a 2 or 3 out of 10 when they're not in camp, Rob and Calvin are at a 6 or a 7. So once we get that name on the bout agreement, like not much changes from a schedule standpoint. It's like 80% of their schedule they're already doing anyway because they're professionals.
Yeah.
And then that last 20% gets dialed in, and that's where, like, especially Jake, that we work with, me, Jake Manini, John Dupree, the wrestling coach, and Sean Farley, the boxing coach, and then Nick Fury, the jiu-jitsu coach. Jake watches a lot of video. I watch a lot of video. We collaborate and we come up with like what we see. And then it's a lot of me sitting on the computer and really like dialing in exactly how the camp will run, different things I need to see the wrestling coach working on, what type of takedowns we're going to be defending, what type we're going to be using. the boxing coach what type of combinations I think will work against, someone like Marlon, what type of, shots we want to stay away from. And same conversations with Jake, and then sitting down and really breaking down all of, the video of the fighter, and then putting the camp together as far as what the final schedule will look like, what the sessions will look like, filming the sessions, and then reviewing what we saw that was good, what we saw that was bad, where we're making gains and where we need to kind of focus more on. And then it's just a constant, tweaking of the process as you get closer and closer. But it's more than meets the eyes. I don't think people realize how much work goes in when the fighters aren't even around. Obviously it's, work on the mats and teaching classes and kind of monitoring classes and collaborating with the coaches. But then on the back end, the amount that people like me and Jake talk, and me and Dupree, and the amount of work we're putting on the back end of things that we're seeing and thinking and trying to tweak. And what do you think about this? I'm noticing this, like we have to step this up or stuff. It's a never ending process. And it does, if done properly, it's pretty exhausting and takes a lot of time.
Yeah. And how long would an ideal camp for you last? Do you like a long camp, or do you prefer a shorter camp?
I mean, with Rob and Calvin, we can take shorter camps because we're already in shape. A lot of times you take short notice and go, are we ready to go 3 rounds? And that. No. These guys are always going to be ready. They're always going to be in shape. But as far as like ideal, it's always that kind of the 8-week mark. You get the 8 weeks, the first 2-3 weeks, you can kind of ease into the extra 20% of the schedule and kind of, you don't have to crush the sparring yet. You could be safe. You can go over the triggers and over the game plan and kind of rep it out a little bit before you get into the, that last 4 to 5 weeks of that's going to be the grind. And then obviously you dial it down a week and then you go to fight week. So 8 weeks, to me, 8 weeks is kind of like the ideal situation.
Yeah. And then another point that you touched on there that I wanted to maybe mention was watching tape back on the fighter that you lined up against. How far back do you go in terms of the opponent's catalogue? Do you ask the fighter to watch tape as well, the fighter who's your fighter? And what kind of things are you looking for when you're watching that tape back?
So 3 questions there. So I don't ask the fighter to watch tape. But usually what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll look for certain things that I'm seeing, like something that I want the fighter to like. I'm going to tell him, but I want him to like see it for his own eyes. Because there's one thing I learned from, I think it was like Mark Lehman back like 12 years ago, is he was a big guy, go put a video together of it working in the UFC, then teach it to your students. And especially fighters, if they see it work in the UFC, then it must work, right?
Yeah.
But if you tell them and you don't give an example of when it worked, they're kind of like, yeah, cool. So, I'll look for a couple of things and then I'll go through all the fights. And then I'll put together videos of like every time this guy gets a takedown, what's it look like? And then I'll put a compilation video together of like all the times he's gotten takedowns in fights. And then you put it on a loop, and then we post that to a private group and let them watch it over and over and over. So that way, number one, they don't have to watch 14 hours of fights to see all the takedowns. They can see it in one video, and then they start to see the reps. So then when I'm in the mat teaching and say, hey, we got to be careful. This is his setup for this. They've already seen it a bunch of times. They know what I'm talking about. So as far as like video goes, I try to make it easy on them where they can just kind of watch the highlights of certain things that we're working on. I go and watch all the fights. Like, I mean, even when we were getting ready for Shane Burgos, I watched his grappling matches, so I don't think a lot of people do that, but it's just, you're looking for things that you maybe haven't come out in a fight, but you want to know are there.
Yeah.
And then the other one was how far back do I ask them to watch video? And then what was the other one?
So that was kind of all 3. The 3 would be, do you ask the fighter to watch them? What are you looking for? And how far back do you go? So I think we've kind of covered all bases there.
Yeah, because I think if you watch, if you just watch the most recent fights, you might not get a good capture of like what their actual skill set is. I think when you watch something over time, you can start to see patterns. You can start to say, hey, in their 3rd fight in their career, this is something they were doing wrong. And look, they're still doing it wrong now. So then you can expect that to happen in your fight. You definitely notice tendencies and habits that you might not notice if you only watch a few fights.
Yeah. And of course, the recency of a fight obviously has an effect, because even if we take Marlon for an example, there was a point in 2018 and 2019 where Marlon quite frankly looked unbeatable when he knocked out Sterling, when he subbed Sun Tzu. So there's also them elements of where the fighter's at to where the fighter has been previously.
Yep. You got to be prepared for the 2018 Marlon, even though the 2019 Marlon wasn't as scary looking.
Yeah. And another thing you mentioned there about training camp, about looking at what the fighter has done, the opponent has done. When you're forming a game plan, are you forming a game plan to nullify an opponent's offense and to work on their weaknesses, or are you looking to work on your fighter's strengths, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a combination. Like I always say is we try to look for the areas where their weaknesses align with our strengths, and then that's a part of the sandbox that we should have an advantage. So if we can do our best to keep the fight in those areas where we know we're really good at this and he lacks there, hang out there all day. Your percentage of winning is going to go up, versus if we're like, he's really good at this, but so are we. Now you're kind of banging your head against the wall. It's going to be whoever gets hurt first. So we're always looking, and it's just like 1%, 2% here and there. If you can just, every time you make a decision in that fight, you go down the path that gives you 1% of an advantage, and then you go down the next path and you do it again. Cumulatively over the 15 minutes, you're generally going to be hanging out in parts of the sandbox that you're going to have a slight advantage, and then you just have to execute.
Yeah. And another thing I maybe wanted to mention was, obviously you're in fight week now. Is there any certain elements or any certain things that you do to keep a fighter calm, but also focused on the fight, or do you let your fighters kind of do their own thing?
No, they definitely do their own thing. They're usually, if it's a Rob fight week, he's usually with his girl in the week, and Calvin plays a huge role in kind of like being his training partner. And then, me and Jake are there to kind of, run the technical side of it. And then if it's Calvin's fight week, Rob usually stays in the room with him, and then me, Jake, and the other coach are in the other room. The big thing is just about the vibe on fight week. Number one rule is don't make the fighter wait. They're the bride and it's their wedding. So this is their wedding week, right? Like you're not going to go make a bride wait at the altar until you finish eating. It's and I take that very serious. And I know all the other coaches get kind of annoyed with me sometimes because I'm like, all right, guys, we got to go. And I'll hold the door. I'm like, let's go now. And they're like, you're so uptight on fight week. It's like, I know I am. I'm kind of annoying to be around on fight week. It's just because I think that these guys, they don't ever need to come out of fight week thinking about something that the coaches did wrong. It's like, we wanted to work out at noon, but they showed up at 12:15, or the fighter says, hey, can we work out at noon? And I'm like, can we just do 12:30? It's easier for me to do that. And then it's like, well, now they're working on my time. And at the end of the day, I'm the coach, I'm the manager, whatever, but they're the boss, within a certain reason. And, if they said, hey, I'm not going to make weight, then I put my foot down and be like, no, we're going to make weight. But like, within reason, like if you look at the employee relationships, like they pay my check. I work for them technically, but we have an understanding of what our roles are. So I'm here to make their week as easy as possible. And the last thing that should happen on fight week is to make it about me or the other coaches. It's 100% about them. Whatever's easier for them, we make it happen. And the idea is just making sure that they're as comfortable as possible going into the fight. That way, he's about to fight the number 3 guy in the world. The last thing he needs to do is worry about what his coaches are doing or trying to make us happy. Like we're here to make him happy, and that's literally all we're doing. We're in our hotel room, we're on call, and that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, there's an amazing video. I think it's either on your Instagram or Jake's Instagram. I think it's of one of Rob's fights, and there's the video is Jake's kind of stood there silent. You're stood there giving some instructions. I think Calvin's just behind you, and Rob's just pacing up and down the locker room. And I think it's what you've just said then really captures it. You've got to kind of let the fighter, to a certain extent, be in the moment, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think if there's one critique I have of MMA coaching, I think there are a lot of coaches who never fought that don't quite understand those final moments and what's going through your head and how nerve-wracking that is. And every coach wants to go out there and say something like impactful and say something that someone can write down and be a quote, and somehow that makes the difference, and that's something they could tell their friends that they said. But I think equally important, and a lot of times more often more important, is the stuff you don't say. You
Yeah.
know, knowing when to just keep your mouth shut and let the fighter do his thing and trust the process. Trust that there's not much you can say right now that's gonna make much of a difference that you haven't already said over the last 8 weeks if done properly.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think sometimes it's just the stuff you don't say that can make more of a difference than the stuff you're actually saying.
And just on that point, do you think it is how much of a benefit do you think it is for the head coach to have previously thought?
I don't think it's a necessary like requirement, but I do think it gives you like a distinct advantage on the mental side of it.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're out there and you know you're going into the third round of a fight and the first two are tough and you can tell the fighter's tired and you're sitting on the stool and your coach is like, you gotta suck it up, you gotta go. I know you're tired, but you gotta go. It's like you could hit that trigger of like, listen, mother effer, like you've never been where I'm at. Like you don't know if I'm tired. Like don't pretend like you know what I'm going through. Like I can sit there. I've had 15 fights. I've won fights. I've lost fights. I've been the underdog. I've been the favorite. I've got rocked. I've been, you know, rocked guys. And, you know, I've had good rounds. I've had bad rounds. There's not much that can happen in a round that I can't look at them and be like, listen, I get it. Like, let's go. Like, I know you can do better. And I think that can resonate with certain fighters. And like I said, it's not necessarily a requirement, but on the mental side of it, understanding the vibe in the locker room, being able to motivate in a fight, being able to like talk to them when they're ornery during fight camp and their diet sucks and they're tired and this and that. It's like I've been everywhere you're at, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that the mental side of it, it's a huge advantage to have been a fighter myself.
And just talking about them things that we're talking about being tired, about maybe being hurt in a fight. When you get a fighter back at the end of a round, are you giving them specific advice in terms of what to do, or are you giving them kind of a confidence booster, or them kind of comforting, or you know maybe more emotive language? What specifically happens in the corner with you and your fighters?
So I think it's different every time because you don't go in with an agenda. You do what needs to be done. So if the round went great, but we were dropping our hands a lot, and maybe you see something that they weren't doing that you were calling, you just get into the first thing. That's Rob. Hey Jake, Rob's at the door. Do you want to open it? Or Calvin's at the door. Sorry, it's Calvin coming in. He's being impatient. I got his Ezekiel breath. But I think you don't go in with a specific agenda like of what to say. Like you just, what's up, buddy? Calvin, say hi.
What's up, bro?
Hey, Calvin.
Yeah, he can't hear you because I got my earpods
okay.
on, but we'll get him on soon. Yeah, you don't go in with a specific agenda of what exactly to say. Like first thing you got to do is just like sit him down, let him breathe, hand them the water, let them drink on their own, and then just chill. And then from there, you're looking to like, all right, and then you got to give them like 2 or 3 tips. Like, hey, let's start keeping that left hand up. The right hand's there, but let's feint before we set it up. You know, whatever. A little bit of advice you're seeing, and then oftentimes it's like I'll be like, all right, Jake, what do you have? And then I'll look for Jake and let him say, you know, what he thinks. And then it's maybe that last minute of like motivation on the way out. I was like, hey man, like you got this round, you're looking really good, you know, something like that. But it's different every time. But I'm not trying to go out there and like scream at him or anything like that. Every fighter's different, but you know, I think I don't need to motivate Robert Calvin. They're already motivated. I just need to tweak like that little 1% of like, hey, you're hunting for this. It's not there. Go for this. You know, something like that.
So it needs to be simple in that moment because
simple, calm. Yeah, it's their minutes to recover. You just gotta, you know, relax. Give them that little bit of advice is gonna help them in the fight. Don't hype them up too much, and just let them, you know, do their thing. But make sure they get the necessary technical instruction as well.
Yeah, great. And maybe let's talk about the 2 guys' fights just briefly. Of course, we're not going to go into specifics. I understand that. Rob's got his fight against Marlon Moraes on Saturday, and the very next event, 16th of January, is Calvin Kattar's main event against Max. Can you give me a very general insight into the game plans going into them 2 fights? Of course, I don't want specifics, just a little bit of a general insight.
Well, I think Marlon Moraes, he's not going to bully us, you know. And anytime you smack a bully in the mouth, they generally back down. Like, and Marlon's not like a bully in life. You know, he's a great guy. He's super nice. Like, I'd probably enjoy hanging out with him. But in a fight, he's a bully. He comes in, he tries to bully you around the cage and make you his bitch. We're not gonna let that happen. Rob needs to, establish that this is my cage.
Yeah.
You're in my world, and you're not going to bully me. And I think when that happens, you can see Marlon break a little bit. And he's dangerous everywhere, but we just got to stand up to the bully and then make him back up. And once that happens, I think Rob's going to get in that flow state. And you see Rob's a very creative striker. He's super smooth, best jab in the division. And I think you're going to start to see Rob pop off, but it's popping off with caution, because at any moment Marlon's dangerous. So it's just about us establishing the fact that, hey, we're not scared of you. We're not going to let you bully us, and you're here to get in a real fight, and let's see how you deal with our skill set.
Yeah. And do you have a slight little insight for Calvin's fight against Max at all?
Yeah, I think with Max is we just have to, sort of the same thing. He just has to understand that, like, you're not just gonna outpoint us around the cage. That's gonna be our cage, and anytime you come forward, you're gonna get hit, and we have a power advantage. So think wisely about how aggressive you want to be, and it's not gonna be a volume play like he gets with a lot of his guys. A lot of guys respect him too much, and I think we have a distinct power advantage. We have a distinct wrestling advantage. A lot of people sleep on Calvin's wrestling, and we have a reach advantage. Everybody talks about Max's size, and yeah, he's a big guy, but we're the same height, and we're 3.5 inch longer reach advantage, and we have, again, the best jab in the featherweight division. So there's not a lot other than experience and the fact that he's been there, done that he has that we don't have, or we have better. So same thing. I think it's just a matter of establishing that it's our cage, and if you come forward, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. And my last question, then I'll get you out of here. I know you're very busy. Supposing that the two guys win their fights, Rob wins his fight against Moraes and Calvin wins his main event against Max Holloway. When? I like that. When the two guys win the fights, where do you think that puts them in their respective divisions? Where do you think would be next for each?
I think that puts Calvin in a title fight, and it puts Rob as a backup for a title fight or in a contender fight. I could see us, getting this win, and then if Jan is fighting Sterling, then maybe we fight a Corey Sandhagen or something like that, or maybe we get the winner of if Cheeto wins. I don't see us fighting Cheeto if he wins, but I think if Aldo wins, maybe we fight Aldo. You beat the number 3 guy, you're probably fighting up, especially when we've won 3 in a row. At that point, a big win against Marlon Moraes. Sorry, my alarm went off. I think it puts, I would say, like, Rob's one fight career progression behind where Rob's at. So we're behind where Calvin's at. So Calvin's sitting at number 6, fighting a contender fight, and then getting a title shot. I think it puts Rob right in that spot where Calvin's at now, where we're going to get that contender fight and then fight for a title. So I think, the cartel's got belts in its future. We just have to execute at this point.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've got the 2 fights. We've got Rob's fight the 19th of December, and we've got Calvin's fight the 16th of January. How can people find you on social media, Tyson?
Yeah, I think Instagram is Tyson_Chartier. And on Instagram, the team Instagram is NE Cartel MMA. So the letter N, the letter E, and then Cartel MMA. We just started that a few weeks ago. We're trying to get that the following up there. And, we've been selling a lot of cartel merchandise. We get some hats, some hoodies, and, it's amazing how much merchandise and swag we're selling. So we appreciate the support on that. And then, the UFC just did a documentary on the team. They were out filming for a few days with us, and they just put together, I think it's like an 8-minute video on YouTube. So if you go to the UFC YouTube, or probably look at any of us on Facebook, or, we've all posted it. It's pretty cool that the UFC sees that our team is doing something special. We're doing it a little bit different, but it's working, and they're trying to highlight that. So check that out, share it, just keep plugging the team. We're doing exciting things. I think we're all good guys. We're pretty accessible. And I think we try to, as much as we can, we try to show love back to the people who are supporting, what we're doing. And I think that resonates with people.
Yeah, it definitely does. Well, thank you for coming on and giving me your time.
I got one question for you, Michael.
Okay, of course.
Who's better at interviewing, me or Jake?
Is he there?
Jake, get out here. Here, you can put this on. I asked him who's can you hear?
I know you didn't.
I said I asked him who's better at interviewing. He said, "Was Jake there?"
The best interview was Rob Font.
That's a good answer. Good answer. All right.
Okay.
We'll get Calvin on. We'll get Calvin on here soon before his fight, and then you can say who's better out of them two, and your answer will be Tyson and Jake.
Brilliant. It was an absolute honour to have you on. It really was. It was, as I said to Jake, it was just as insightful as any other fight. In fact, in some ways, it was more insightful than some of the fighters we've had on, or different, I suppose. So it was really interesting.
No, I appreciate it.